Welcome to Medical Myths, Legends, and Fairy Tales. I'm your host, Dr. Alan Christensen. Look, you know that between the latest online fads and the crazy media headlines, it's easier than ever to get confused about your health. And you and I just want to feel better and live longer. We want to know what works. And we can't wait for further studies. We need to make decisions today based on the best evidence we've got. Well, that's exactly what this show is here for. So let's get to it.
Hi there, this is Dr. Linda Kashaba from Integrative Health. Would you like some help with your thyroid? We would absolutely love to help you out. And guess what? We can even do remote care. Please call us today at 480-657-0003 to set up your first appointment. If you mention code podcast20, you will get 20% off from your first visit. That phone number again is 480-657-0003, and the code is podcast20. Can't wait to meet you.
Hey, Dr. C here with you. You know, that green smoothie, that could hurt you. There's oxalates in that, so put it down fast. Yeah, well, that's what you often hear. Oxalates, are they dangerous? They're in a lot of foods that we think are good for us, but do they harm our kidneys? Do they raise inflammation? Do they cause vaginal pain? Do they cause fibromyalgia? These are real concerns that you'll see online. And I think it's sad when people are unnecessarily frightened of food. There's enough things in our world that we have to be cautious of, and it's tough when food gets on the list when it doesn't need to. So I wanted to talk about this one. I've written about this before, but I wanted to have a partner in arms to talk it through. So I reached out to Dr. Sarah Ballantyne. About a year ago, a mutual friend, JJ Virgin, connected us through email and said, hey, you guys should really talk and collaborate. You'd probably enjoy each other. And regretfully, it took me a year to do so, but I'm so glad that I did get to meet with her. We got going before the recording started, and we were just off on our own world of nerdy discussions of biochemistry, and finally realized, hey, we should start recording. This might be interesting stuff for people. So I had a blast speaking with Sarah. She goes by the Paleo Mom publicly. That's her website. And she's a doctorate. She's a published scientist in areas of cell biology. Super bright gal. And we had a great time. It's funny because I don't really identify as paleo. And she talked about how she does, and she's almost found it limiting, and how many of the core tenets of the extreme paleo world she does not, but some of the basic ideas she finds make sense. And I would certainly agree with that. So please enjoy the discussion here on oxalates, and really a bit more about just accuracy and good information and how we can get misled by fads. She and I had a lot to share interest in that way. And I hope to speak to her soon about carbohydrate. She has a strong interest in debunking a lot of myths against carbohydrate, as do I. So hopefully we'll have her back soon and talk further. But for now, I bring you the discussion with Dr. Sarah Ballantyne. Hey, Sarah, welcome to the show. So glad to have you here.
I'm so glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
We were, I guess in the green room, before we got going on the recording, and we were out of control and nerding out and having fun. And we decided to save a lot of stuff for on the air, but yeah.
I think we have very compatible approaches to nutrition, to lifestyle, to valuing scientific evidence. And for me, that's always, I don't want to say refreshing, because I don't want to imply that I rarely encounter that in the world. But I think that it's for me, that's the root of everything that I do, is really trying to keep everything that I promote evidence-based. And I love being able to get into these really nitty-gritty, nerdy conversations, with drawing, oh, did you see that study? Did you see that study? So I think we could have easily talked for 3 hours before we ever hit the record button.
Here's another quick aside. So I'm playing with this phrase. I love the evidence-based concept. I've gotten a little bit, I don't know, I think that many use it in a way to where they have ideas and then they find evidence to base their ideas on, and they prop it up. I'm toying with the phrase evidence-led. I think that if you let the evidence lead you, I think that's really what most people are really talking about. But I think there are some that, they are taking existing ideas or preconceptions and then using evidence to prop that up. So I'm kind of playing with that idea instead.
I really love that. You're seeing exactly what I'm seeing in the alternative health community, which is people searching for the evidence for their preconceived ideas about something rather than looking through the evidence and drawing conclusions based on scientific research. And I love the idea of tweaking that phrase a little bit to really emphasize the importance of, looking at the full body of scientific literature on a topic to try to understand where the scientific consensus is and where the missing information that we don't know yet is, and where there's, nuance and context is important, and bring that more detailed picture to the public rather than the marketing-led soundbite that has my 3 papers that I found that says the same thing, ignoring the 10 papers that disagree with that in order to promote whatever it is, the thing that I've got in my head that must be true.
I had this really painful learning experience many years ago. I was writing a manuscript for a book, and I had this chapter planned out, and I wanted to have like just a blanket reason for someone to be off of processed foods. So I figured, I'll throw in MSG as the evil thing and the simple reason to throw out all processed food. And it's in all sorts of things, and it does all this bad stuff. And I had read books about all these horrible things it did. So I had this chapter pretty much written, and then I did exactly what I'm telling you people shouldn't do. I went back afterwards to find citations to support these statements that I had. And in doing so, I found out that none of my preconceptions were correct, and I had to do this whole thing over again. And
I did the exact same thing in my first book. I had planned a section on MSG sensitivity because I grew up with it in my family. My mom would get crippling migraines every time she consumed MSG. So clearly, if my mom has MSG sensitivity, this must be a legit medical condition. And meanwhile, it's not. There's well-controlled, double-blinded studies where they give some people MSG and some people not, and the symptoms are random. So that doesn't mean that foods that contain MSG are good for us, but there's something more complicated going on there that we don't understand yet.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did the exact same thing with MSG, and then I had to have a little so by the way, I was just going to raise my hand here and say, I know we all hate MSG, but it's not. MSG sensitivity at this point, anyways, is not a thing. Like there's no mechanism to describe it, and we can't confirm onset of symptoms in double-blind clinical trials. Therefore, something else that my mom was consuming in cheap Chinese food was clearly the problem behind the migraine.
And I've done some deep dives into placebos and nocebos, and I've come away from all that thinking that our expectations are just so crazy powerful. It's just so much beyond what we think.
I think that's true. I think it also, I think we're at a point now, not just in terms of expanding human knowledge with scientific research, right? So scientific research now is so granular and so detailed. And, it used to be like, right in the 1700s, we were just trying to understand how the small intestine worked, and how did we digest nutrients? It was these really big questions, and it was really like the 20,000 foot view. Now we're getting into these super nitty gritty details in terms of how does this one vesicle within this one cell type contribute to this one cell signaling cascade that is triggered by this thing. And it's so granular that it's really, really challenging to take that step back and look at research from a more sort of comprehensive, what is the big picture? What here is actionable? But I also think that it's a really, really exciting time in human knowledge because we're at a point where we can start drawing a lot more conclusions in terms of our diet and lifestyle best practices, because we've expanded knowledge to this level where it's very, very granular. But unfortunately, in the scientific community, there isn't a job that's like what you and I do, of that deep dive into what I call the rabbit hole of PubMed, where I'm reading hundreds of scientific studies and just kind of letting myself, this is cited by this one, that sounds interested, and letting myself just sort of follow these winding paths. I think that's needed in basic research. Somebody whose job it is to not just write a review article, but to really look at, a whole field, or maybe 10 fields that are tangentially related, and start pulling together that big picture and communicating it to the public. I think right now it's sort of, the exception rather than the rule. It's people like us who have a passion for this, who have taken on this mantle for ourselves. But I think there's something that should be a whole career, right? It should be supported by some kind of grant funding, so that it can be completely independent. There's obviously a need for people who are looking through the scientific literature for consensus, for really understanding how these systems not just work individually, but with each other, and then translating it in a way that's not the food pyramid or my plate.
And yeah, this is a pitfall that I would argue is not part of any kind of a conspiracy, but just the passive ways in which we have incentives and science structured. You've been in academia and you get how this works, and it's all about finding some novel mechanism or some positive outcome and having some interest built around that. But yeah, sadly, that doesn't always translate into things that are useful or actionable.
Well, I also think that we're at a point now where the things that we're trying to understand are incredibly detailed, and it's hard to draw an action item out of a very detailed, right? How this one protein binds with this one receptor in this one particular case. It's hard to take that tiny piece of information and understand the relevance to human life without the 50 other pieces of information from 50 other different labs. And sometimes, those researchers aren't even presenting at the same conferences. They're not publishing in the same journals, right? They're all, talking with their colleagues who are all interested in that same really, really detailed chemical pathway, and not necessarily, and I don't think it's their job. I don't think it's their job to be thinking about how their piece of information that they're studying, they're trying to expand the knowledge on this one little tiny pathway. I don't think it's their job to necessarily try to figure out where that plugs into tangential pathways.
Well, in most cases, that work is setting out in order for finding drug mechanisms to, some candidates for novel drug mechanisms, patentable compounds.
Well, basic science research has not been well supported since
science,
really the 1970s. So if you look at grant applications, sort of 50s, 60s, which was, if you sort of look at the statistics then, about half of basic science grants were funded in any given grant cycle. And now you're at a situation where if you look at National Science Foundation funding or National Institutes of Health funding, in any given grant cycle, you're maybe looking at like 6% of grants actually getting funded. And that government funding is the unbiased, right? It's the money to do research that doesn't come with any strings. It's just, hey, you've got a great idea. You've got some interesting preliminary data showing that your great idea is probably going to pan out into something. Here's the funding to go explore that great idea. And with grants being so competitive, the way that a lot of researchers sort of necessarily have to get funding for their research is through things like industrial partnerships or by changing their research into something that is patentable, or, having a focus instead of really just understanding the system. I'm going to understand how I can manipulate the system with a drug, because the drug is something that somebody might pay for. And it's really, we could fix a lot in terms of how science is performed these days by actually just funding it and making it a national priority, that we understand that, expanding human knowledge is a fundamentally important thing to solve all of humanity's problems. And this goes, this is not just biology, but this goes across all of the basic sciences. If we actually supported basic science research without expecting something monetizable at the end, without expecting that this is going to turn into a patent or a technological development or a drug, we're just going to value increasing human understanding of
knowledge for its own sake. Yeah.
Right. And I think we could fix a lot of what is a challenge for us. Now, every time you and I read a paper, we have to look at the disclosure statement to figure out if there's anything, any large grains of salt we need to start applying to our interpretation of the results.
Yeah, that's a huge thing. So let's at least touch on oxalates here.
Yes.
There's a lot of responses I'm tempted to have to that too, but let's at least hit oxalates and then have some fun, talk a bit more about the rest. And this is an important thing, and I think people really struggle about this. And I think that we're in a time in which, I don't know, I hope that we're going to see this start to reverse, but there's been this really strong cycle of almost like, she who eats the fewest foods wins.
Right.
Like, no, I don't think that's the case anymore.
I think this actually dates back to the 70s. So like popularity of the Atkins diet and all of the sort of other low carb diets that came from it. You have the same philosophy in paleo, in the ketogenic diet. You have things like even veganism is sort of the same philosophy. So these are all diets that are based on what you don't eat. Yeah. And I don't think you can define a diet based on the foods you avoid. A diet sort of by definition is what is incorporated into the foods on your plate. But I think we have this now decades long history of alternative diets being defined by what you avoid. And when you get some kind of results by adopting any one of these different options based on the thing that you don't eat, I think it is really natural when it comes time to troubleshoot, when it comes time to, okay, I saw these results, but I want these further results. Cutting out all these foods got me this far. Down. Clearly, right? All I need to do is cut out more foods. And we're seeing now these, we're seeing that we're going to talk about oxalates. We're seeing that both in sort of the food intolerance, food sensitivity sphere, but we're also seeing it in, I'm going to just go ahead and use the label fad diet. We're seeing these dietary strategies that are based on eliminating more and more and more, and we're seeing them take hold despite a complete lack of scientific evidence. The carnivore diet's an excellent example of this, but like juice fasts would be the plant-based version of this. We're seeing these fads take hold because of the part where we did see some results from these diets that were defined based on eliminations, and it being, I think it is sort of like the natural next step. If eliminating more must get me more. And I obviously the problem with that is that cutting out junk food is only part of why a diet is going to be beneficial. A diet is also beneficial based on providing nutrients. And if you don't have that piece, then you can't have a healthy diet.
Yeah, and it's funny. You talked about how people can make a change and cut something out and have some, perhaps real benefit. And one thing I've realized is that you can never change one facet of your diet at a time. It's completely impossible.
Right.
Just make this up. Let's say that cutting out, I don't know, blue foods is like the latest thing. You cut out blue foods in your diet. Well, you can't just cut out blue foods. So what happens is if you change nothing else about your diet, well, now you're eating less total food. And that's a change separate from eating less blue foods, reducing your food intake. Or on the other hand, even if you do nothing differently, well, now you're eating different proportions of food because whatever percentage was blue food, now that's gone. And now all the other percentages have changed. And the other thing that's even more common is when you cut out the blue food, well, you're going to usually add in something different. So there's always a lot of changes that go on. You can never really have accurate attribution to a single change by itself.
Absolutely. But I think that the way that these diets are communicated, right, everything's sound bite-ified, right? So everything is distilled to these very simple yes-no rules. And I think that one of the biggest challenges we have now in the alternative health community is to actually educate, to avoid distilling things down to sound bites, because it creates this problem where if you are just avoiding blue foods, which is a new one I hadn't heard of, I was like, but there's so many great, delicious things. Blueberries are blue. Hang on. Why? I mean, blue food dye, sure.
Could be a new book.
Okay, there you go. The non-blue food diet. I think that the problem is the average person is doing something based on this oversimplification of some concept, often some very a concept that is not evidence led. How about that? And
I love it.
and then doing this very rudimentary understanding of why this might be a good idea. So it doesn't empower people with the knowledge to be able to think critically about whether or not that strategy is good in the first place, but also where to go from there, which is why oxalate sensitivity has become this huge buzzword in the community. And it's often self-diagnosed, but as you mentioned, practitioners are diagnosing this. And meanwhile, the scientific evidence, like MSG, is not there for the vast majority of people who are now avoiding a whole collection of really good, nourishing, nutrient-dense foods.
Yeah. So when did this issue first come onto your radar? When did you first become aware of this being a concern?
When I wrote my first book, which is all about the paleo-autoimmune protocol, I had a whole troubleshooting section in the book in which I was trying to be fairly comprehensive in terms of sort of complicating factors. So if you are adopting the paleo-autoimmune protocol to help manage autoimmune disease, and you have, let's say, really severe gut dysbiosis, or you have, gallbladder issues, so you have trouble digesting fat, or let's say you have salicylate sensitivity or histamine intolerance, being aware of what those symptoms would look like and what type of practitioner you would seek out for help. I wasn't trying to solve all of those problems, but rather help educate the reader so that people had at least a sense of where to start with troubleshooting. Because one of the things,
next steps.
Yeah, one of the things that we have with autoimmune disease, but really all chronic illness in general, is food and lifestyle can get us really far. There's a lot of healing to be had with the right diet and dialing in our lifestyle. But for a lot of people, there's underlying factors that are holding back our body's ability to respond to really good food, right? If we can't digest the nutrients, it's going to be really, really hard to benefit from a nutrient-dense diet. So looking at those underlying factors in terms of what might be holding back healing. And so really it was sort of like a functional medicine type approach, but really just giving people a starting place and then passing the ball on to a functional medicine provider. And I did not talk about oxalates in that book because, as I think we've already hinted at, true oxalate sensitivity is incredibly rare, something like 1 in 3 million people. And it really falls under, I think, the same umbrella as Candida, which is also often diagnosed based on symptoms.
So true oxalate sensitivity, you're referring to hyperoxaluria, genetic hyperoxaluria?
Yes, or oxalosis, which can be a consequence of something like Crohn's disease or celiac disease or a side effect from bariatric surgery. But it really is, these conditions they do exist, right? So hyperoxaluria, oxalosis, are complicated ways. So they're conditions in which we have too much oxalate either in urine or blood, and they may or may not be related to dietary oxalates. So they're super complex. But they are actual conditions. I think when you look at, if you just go onto Dr. Google and look up oxalate sensitivity, you will get these lists of symptoms that are, purportedly related to high oxalate foods that have nothing to do with the symptoms of oxaluria or oxalosis, right? So, really, the symptoms that are related to high oxalates in the body are fairly limited compared to, right? It's the production of calcium oxalate kidney stones, and it is joint and muscle pain from oxalate crystals building up in joints and muscles. And that's measurable. You can have a blood test or a urine test and measure the amount of oxalates in your blood or your urine. That is something that even a conventional MD can do. And it's very, very different from how oxalate sensitivity is typically presented. And so where I got interested in this is was from people, right? It was from people who were reading my first book and saying, "Oh, what about What about candida? What about oxalates? What about all of these other things that, here's my list of foods I can't eat. What's left? And that necessitated for me the deeper dive into this topic.
That's cool. I've seen people in those situations to where they're already targeting some particular diets or particular avoidance strategies, and then they'll add in some other filters as well, like one or two other lists. And the end result is that the available foods that fits through all those filters is so short that I've seen people clinically reach a state to where, they're consuming, no joke, like just a handful of exotic foods. I've seen people on hippopotamus meat and like that, and, like watercress. Like I remember someone that was on those two foods. And at some point, you can actually buy hippopotamus meat. That was
my follow-up question. How do I get my hands on some hippopotamus?
But at some point when your diet's so limited, there's probably real physiologic changes that occur in which your gut gets less capable of breaking down a broader variety of foods. And then of course there can also be psychological effects of concern and fear. But the net combined effect of that is that people end up like just painted into a corner of almost nothing left, and there's nothing else to cut out, and the only ways forward will have to be some regression of symptoms by adding foods in. So it's a scary thing to cut out foods unnecessarily.
I think it also it gets people into trouble. So a lot of my messaging, right? So I try to stay clear of paleo diet dogma. I'm not a person who wants to throw on a toga and grab my spear and go live in the woods. But I don't rationalize the facets of a paleo template with, purely ancestral diets. So I'm really looking at the physiology, the biochemistry, how are compounds and foods impacting our bodies at the cellular and molecular level. And nutrient density, our nutrient sufficient diet, is my main criteria for constructing a healthy diet. So that means that we're getting all of the essential nutrients that we need from food. And that's essential and non-essential. So I would say also making sure that we're getting enough fiber in our diets, a fermentable substrate for our gut microbiome. That's technically a non-essential nutrient. However, you can't be healthy without it. And so,
that's a great point. I'd love to expand on real slightly, because I see people often say things like, why would you consume X if X is not essential? And we easily meet our essential needs. Like for fats, for example, it takes the tiniest amounts to meet what's required. And past that point, we're not done with our calories. And, vitamin C, no one says, well, you only need 10 milligrams a day. Don't go over that. So right. there's certainly a place where past the essentials, there's things that are still certainly useful.
I think it's in part how we define an essential nutrient. So we define an essential nutrient as something that you get sick or die if you don't consume sufficient quantities of. So, right, if you don't consume enough vitamin C, you get scurvy. We have these like diseases that are related to nutrient deficiency. So we define an essential nutrient based on the conditions that we know that are linked to deficiency and severe deficiency potentially resulting in death. We have this whole class of nutrients that are labeled as non-essential. And in part, that's because we don't have a way of measuring health. We can measure disease much more easily than we can measure health. So we can say, you're not going to die if you don't eat this, but that's different than saying you will be healthy, right? You will be healthy even if you don't eat this. That's a completely different statement. And so I think the term non-essential nutrient is very misleading because it makes it sound like it's optional. And it's not. Yeah. If you're pursuing optimal health, which I think is what we're all doing in this community, we need to actually really honor and value non-essential nutrients, because that's really the difference between surviving and thriving.
And a big thing too, along those lines, there's many things that happen to be in foods and happen to be in the body and happen to be measurable in the blood. And it's really easy to get conflated how they all interact. We'll talk about in that context of oxalates. Our body makes a bunch of them. They're needed for all types of important intracellular functions of DNA, RNA transcription. And they also happen to show up in the diet. And then the other wrinkle is they also tend to be mediators of inflammation. So it's really easy to see that in calcified thyroid nodules, for example, if they're precancerous, they may have oxalates around there. Or in calcified breast tissue, there can be oxalates present. And so it can be really tempting to make a jump and say, oh, that came from spinach. Like, well, no.
Yeah. I think there's to build on that idea even further, I think that it is one of many consequences of gut dysbiosis. I think there's really compelling evidence showing that some of the probiotic strains that are most sensitive to a low fiber diet, which is the Western diet, but there's a lot of alternative health diets that aren't sufficient in fiber as well. They're the strains that are most sensitive to stress, inadequate sleep, sedentary lifestyle, low vegetable intake. Those really sensitive strains are the ones that they don't just help break down oxalates, but they actually stimulate the secretion of oxalates that are produced into the body, into the digestive tract for elimination. And so these strains that, right, it's so common for people to do stool analysis and come back with 0 bifidobacterium strains.
Yeah.
And they're one of the most fundamental genera of bacteria in a healthy gut microbiome. I mean, there's a lot of really interesting research in Oxalobacter formigenes, which is, a very specific oxalate-loving bacteria, but just Lactobacillus and Bifidobacterium are also really important for degrading oxalates and maintaining oxalate homeostasis. And so, while there's definitely, right, inflammation can be driving some of these processes, there are certainly genetic factors. This could be the missing linchpin here that's holding everything together may very well be the gut microbiome, in which case we need to look at high oxalate levels in the body as a symptom rather than an underlying problem of its own.
Well, and there's systemic levels, but there's also just localized inflammatory mediated effects. You can think about calcium in the same way. You can put a grain of sand in an oyster and it calcifies around that. And so too, the body will often calcify in response to chronic inflammatory states.
It's too bad we don't make pearls, though. That would be pretty great.
I guess they wouldn't be as sharp as gout or oxalate crystals. They would be a lot smoother. Yeah. But if there were, you could get to them, that'd be handy. If you could just cough them up or something.
Right? That could be a whole new industry right there.
But yeah, calcified issues as well are not related to calcium metabolism or calcium intake or calcium ingestion. They're just part of the localized microarchitecture of a chronic inflammatory response. And so too in the case of oxalates.
Well, and they can be tied to, right, so calcification can also be tied to, say, severe vitamin D deficiencies. So yeah. I think that understanding that there's other things going on that are worthwhile, working with a functional or integrative medicine practitioner to start looking at root causes rather than I have these symptoms when I eat spinach, therefore I'm going to avoid 50 different foods that are high in oxalates. I think that we end up creating additional problems for ourselves by, as you said, eliminating foods to the point where there's so little diversity in our diet that we can no longer achieve nutrient sufficiency.
Yeah, I looked back a bit over the history about some of the concepts behind the oxalate reactions, and it seemed one of the early ideas was around Vulvodynia. And there was a plausible hypothesis that some that had this type of vulvar pain did have higher urinary amounts of oxalates. So there was a theory put forth, there was some testing done to see if there was a consistent relationship amongst those who were symptomatic and those who were not in their urinary levels, and also further tests to see if there were relationships between dietary intake and symptoms or urinary levels. And yeah, it was a plausible hypothesis, but it was thoroughly studied and none of those relationships really panned out from further analysis.
Yeah, the studies looking at dietary oxalates and oxalate levels in the body have been interesting in the sense that they don't show at all what you would predict. So if you were going to say that oxalate levels in the body were a result of oxalate sensitivity, meaning that we're absorbing too many oxalates from our diet, then you would predict that the higher the oxalate content in food, the more oxalates you would have in the body. And that hasn't panned out to be the case at all. It's sort of all over the map in terms of even in people who, are, not regulating their oxalate levels very well and not actually achieving oxalates homeostasis. The relationship is nowhere near. It's not even that it's not linear to dietary oxalates. It's not predictable. It does not seem. If that was really the case, if dietary oxalates were driving oxalate sensitivity or driving calcium oxalate kidney stone production in people who are stone formers, you would expect it to have some kind of mathematical formula that you can predict a threshold amount of oxalates that would cause a problem. And that hasn't been the case. And there's even some really high oxalate foods that are, for example, linked to reduced calcium oxalate stone formation, like green tea.
Like tea, yep.
And so if you can't identify a mechanism or a predictable reaction, then that completely undermines the hypothesis. And it's okay. I mean, it as you said, it's a hypothesis that seemed very plausible. The evidence hasn't borne that out. There's something more complicated going on there. And it may be that confluence of, chronic mild dehydration with some gut dysbiosis, potentially with some nutritional deficiencies like vitamin D deficiency, and maybe with even, the sort of tendency to supplement with incredibly high doses of vitamin C could potentially be contributing. And so this is where I think the tendency to just cut out a bunch of foods is really misguided, because there's probably some easier solutions, right? Check vitamin D levels, hydrate, maybe do some stool analysis. I think there's ways that we can get at root cause and maintain variety in the diet.
The case of kidney stones, you mentioned that, and that's just such a powerfully compelling counter example. Those who are genetically prone to hyper-excrete oxalates in their urine, hyperoxaluria, and they form kidney stones, there's been several studies on whether their dietary intake of oxalates predicts their rate of kidney stones, and it clearly does not. And you mentioned some of the bigger drivers that are relevant: hydration, sodium intake has been shown to be a big factor. You mentioned fiber; that's also been shown to be a predictor for them. And then also too little in terms of magnesium or calcium. Those are all drivers. But yeah, the intake has not correlated with the output in those populations.
And if anything, high oxalate vegetables are protective. Like if anything, they're the opposite of what you would predict.
So then the question comes to those who are struggling with more vague symptoms or more inflammatory issues or more autoimmune issues, and their concern about whether oxalates are an issue for them. And it's important to realize that the idea as to whether or not these things are pro-inflammatory are based upon circumstances in which they were thought to possibly have some role driving inflammation, dietary oxalates that is, but were further studied and just did not pan out. So there's no reason to think that this would be an issue in other populations if the most central at-risk relevant populations didn't seem this relationship.
Yeah, I agree completely. And this is one of the reasons why I really prioritize all of the educational resources that I create being evidence-led. I really like this phrase. I'm going to start using it.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'll give you credit every time I do. There'll be a little yeah. So I think that there's different places that you can start troubleshooting if somebody listening to this podcast was avoiding high oxalate foods, or thought that maybe they were dealing with oxalate sensitivity based on some article on the internet. Food and symptom journals.
A test that was done.
Right.
Someone might have had an organic acids test done. They were told they were excreting too much oxalate. It was a danger for them. I've heard that quite a bit.
Sure.
It's totally ironic. I wrote a deep dive article about oxalates a few years ago, and someone had written in and asked me a question like that. It was actually a close friend of mine, and I wanted her to remain anonymous. So I used another friend's name, which happened to be Sarah. So I've got a long article about oxalates, which is all written to Sarah. And that was that's total coincidence here for today.
That's okay. I'll take it. I'll pretend it's me the whole time. Yeah, I think that there's other more obvious places to start troubleshooting. And I always try to really encourage people to troubleshoot before eliminating additional foods. Because I think
That's cool.
even as we talk about other sensitivities that do have some scientific evidence behind them, like histamine sensitivity or salicylate sensitivity, although it's worthwhile
Yeah.
adding a little footnote on salicylate sensitivity, that it's completely unclear whether avoiding high salicylate foods is actually necessary. It may just be avoiding salicylate exposure in drugs and things like antacids. So with that little footnote on salicylate sensitivity, even in those cases, I think there can still be a link, right? So vitamin E deficiency can drive histamine intolerance. So there's still other possible avenues that don't involve eliminating additional foods. And I think it's really, really important here to work with a practitioner who is very savvy and really understands these systems really well, to be able to hone in on, whether or not there's something that's a much easier fix than now challenging our ability to get the nutrients that we actually need from our diet.
And here's a quick mental exercise someone can take. If you think about the possible reactions, even if you take it at face value and say, I eat this food and I feel badly from that, the mental exercise is, does that affect everyone in that way? Well, of course it doesn't. You can always think of people that eat a certain food and do fine with that. And you say, well, yeah, they're different. Cool. How are they different? Mm-hmm. That's the important part. What is the difference? If that reaction is legitimate or real, then let's explore that difference. And let's see if we can't pull that out and identify it and resolve that and get someone to where they have more capacity for leeway amongst healthy foods, but just realize that it's not so much the food that's the culprit. If there is a real reaction, it's what is that difference that's driving that.
Well, then you just opened an entire can of worms right there, because I think that the other thing that goes sort of under-acknowledged in the alternative health community is the interface between diet and lifestyle. So our tolerance of foods, let's say suboptimal foods, right? Nutrient void foods that have potentially inflammatory compounds in them, is influenced by how much stress we're under, how well we're sleeping, if we're getting enough sleep, if we sleep on a consistent schedule, how active we are, if we're moving throughout the day, if we're avoiding overtraining, even things like our sense of community, right? So things that are direct impacts to mental health are all feeding into various immune system aspects that are controlling our reactions to certain foods, hormone systems that are feeding into this as well. And so it sometimes is not the food, but rather the entire collection of inputs to health. And it means we need to take a very holistic approach to understanding, we'll call it sensitivities, because a lot of sensitivities can be addressed not through elimination of a food, but through identifying nutrient deficiencies, identifying lifestyle factors that are contributing, that aren't dialed in. All right, just not getting enough sleep is inflammatory. Just being stressed is inflammatory and causes intestinal permeability. So really understanding that system I think is important.
A really fun pattern interrupt I like to throw at people in those situations to just give them a glimpse about what could be possible is talk to them about what happens if they're on like a long vacation. Mm-hmm. And so many people have had an experience of, maybe they've been at a tropical place for a week or two and they've noticed that all these things they've struggled with were gone.
Yeah.
And well, the food was different. Well, this was different. Okay, well, something was different, right? So this is a possible state for you to be in. And maybe the solution is not to live on the beach forever, but there are some elements and there's some, or maybe that is.
Yeah, I was going to say, that sounds pretty great. I want that to be my solution.
But there are some variables at play that are available that allowed your body to work differently. And we could think through what are some of the biggest differences between day-to-day life and what was going on in that vacation, that maybe there's some we can control, some we can't, but of those we can, let's explore that a bit.
I get that story too all the time. Hey, I went on this European vacation and I was able to eat bread when I was in Italy, and then I came home and I had my same terrible reactions to gluten. Is the wheat different? And I mean, there are certainly some differences in how the wheat is grown, but that's probably not it. It's probably the fact that while you were on vacation, you were probably much more aligned with the sun. You were probably going to bed earlier and more consistently. You were probably getting enough sleep. You were probably enjoying yourself. You're probably spending a lot more time in nature, right? All of these other things that are contributing to how
you're walking a lot, you're interacting with people, you're challenging yourself mentally, and
so many other things that I love your philosophy of looking at these other factors and how can we take that thing that was special about vacation and now integrate that into our everyday lives. Because also I would love to feel like I'm on vacation all the time. That sounds really amazing.
We talked a bit before too about just the idea. I think you and I are realizing we both struggled a lot about this, because I'm just going to attempt to speak for you, and just please cut me if I'm wrong. But I think we've come into this space because we've seen some radically positive change in our own health because of the benefits of lifestyle that didn't come from just simple conventional medicine. It came from really diving in and going deep into lifestyle and how transformative that can be. And I think we feel that there's something there for so many people that's available for them if they get the right information. But at the same time, I think we see that in this space, there's a chance for, you want to be open-minded, but you don't want your brains to fall out.
Right.
I think we're more vulnerable on this side to get trapped into some of the fad cycles, and inadvertently have people who can follow those can go the wrong way when there's potential that they could be helped.
Yeah, that is a very accurate summary of my experience. I struggle with this personally, right? So I have a PhD in medical biophysics, a medical research background. I come at all of the educational resources that I create from the perspective of really trying to understand the scientific literature and create a thorough educational resource that presents a balanced and nuanced picture to help really inform people so they can make a better day-to-day choices. It's not about perfection, but it's about understanding what the better choice is and making that more often. And I do this currently under the umbrella of the paleo diet, because as I read through the scientific literature, my conclusions in terms of what an optimal human diet is, the thing that most closely aligns to is the paleo diet. But even aligning myself with that label has the challenge of being kind of wrapped up into some of the more fad elements that have pretty strong voices in this community right now, and also limiting my ability to message outside of this community. And I think that it's then even more compounded by the fact that on the internet, we all can get a megaphone. All you really need is to be charismatic and have some kind of consistency with when you post so that people know to expect it. And to scare people. Right. I mean, that's the other thing, right? Is social media algorithms reward the most controversial, the thing that stimulates fear, anger, outrage, right? Argument, right? The more something is, instigating engagement, right? That's what it's actually called. But that is the argument between the vegans and the carnivores on a post. That's the post that's going to get seen by more people. And meanwhile, I think the criteria of does this get people all worked up should not be the criteria for information related to diet and lifestyle actually making it to more, people's homes. And I think that compounds everything, because it rewards pseudoscience. It rewards fear mongering. And so in this wonderful age of the internet, because the internet is an amazing platform, social media platforms are wonderful for messaging and for reaching people. It's requiring the average person to be much more internet savvy, to have higher levels of scientific literacy, to be able to sift through good quality information and the opposite of that. And it's such a challenge as somebody in this sphere who's trying to maintain really high standards in terms of the information that I'm putting out.
And it's tricky stuff for the consumer, like you said, all those reasons, and plus that the networks on which people are spending so much of their lives, we all are, they're incentivized for keeping people there and active. Something I realized, really good book I read recently, Digital Minimalism. I don't know if you've read that one yet, but boy, it was a powerful book for me. And the whole matrix, red pill, blue pill. So I had a, which one did he take? Was it the red pill? I don't know.
He took the red pill.
You took the red pill? Okay. So I had a red pill moment in one little section of the book. And what they talked about was that, like you were describing, how the things that are the most, that engender a lot of interaction, good or bad, are the things that become spread. And by spreading, we often think that it just means that everyone goes to that. But it really means that these platforms actively push that content because they've realized that that's what is keeping people on the platform the most. So the red pill thing that I got from this book was that we're not the consumers of Facebook. We're not the customers of Facebook. We misunderstand that. We're not the customers of Facebook or Google at all. We're the product. And our time, our lives, that's the product. The customers are the advertisers, and your precious time, your hours spent on platform, that's the product. So they're not incentivized to serve you because you're really not the customer. It's really all about just keeping you, the product, there on the platform so that you're able to be advertised to.
Well, I think the other complicating factor here is that as a platform like Facebook is pushing this, controversial content out, that content having more visibility has this weird psychological effect of giving it validity. And validity it does not deserve. So we have this, we just, it's human nature, right? So we assume that if Facebook is showing me this thing, it's because it's real and it's true. And we're seeing this, right? We're seeing this across, this is in politics. This is in every area. And of course, this is also why we're seeing more tribalism even within the alternative health community, is in large part because social media is programming us to take a side, and it becomes something that really requires being actively aware of remembering to be open to new information and being willing to assimilate new information into our knowledge base. And that's something that is, I'm sure you experience that as well, as somebody who, that is, I really just want to write a post and be like, here's what the science says, here's the facts. And people to go, oh, look, I know that thing now. And instead, if I can write as thoroughly a referenced and balanced, nuanced picture post as possible. And the person who had this previous belief, they believed, for example, that celery juice was going to cure all of their ills, is going to read about celery.
Oh, wait, it's not?
No, sadly. Celery is a great nutrient-dense food. Celery juice is not magic.
But it has these undiscovered sodium compounds that eradicate Epstein-Barr. I read that. I'm sure I did.
Oh my gosh. It promotes
Actually, I think it's sodium complexes. I'm sorry, undiscovered sodium complexes.
Yeah. I like putting sodium complexes on my meals at the dinner table to make it taste better.
But it's the undiscovered ones that really count.
Ones. Yeah. I can write, and I have done, very detailed article on, what are the compounds in celery that are really exciting phytonutrients that have been discovered and that have really great effects and make celery a really compelling food to include in our diet. And how much of that is thrown out with the pulp when you juice celery, 60%. And what is it about celery juice that might increase absorption? It's a very small effect. And meanwhile, like here's my post here's all the science about celery. And somebody who has decided that celery juice is their, magic key to health is closed off to that information And, the number of comments that I had on that post that were like, oh, well, you should just try celery juice. That's not what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to say, here's the science, and it's a complex, nuanced picture about the compounds in celery and what they may or may not do for you. And then I always feel like the person that I'm writing for is the person who sees all of the pro celery juice stuff that's going viral on social media and is skeptical and wants to know the real story. But I really, and I don't know how to do this with where our society is now. I want everyone to be receptive to fact-based information.
I think there are a certain number of people out there, and I've just got to believe that it's a growing number, or at least we're able to connect better, who are looking for
Yes.
things like that. I just found your celery post. I'm so glad you did that. I'm going to take that off my list of things to write about. I'm going to start referring to yours. You saved me a couple of days. Thank you
You're
very
welcome.
much. But a pitfall is that there's the messages that are popular and easy to hold on to, and there's the messages that are accurate. Another book I loved was called Wrong, Why Experts Keep Failing Us. I forgot, but I just looked now. It was David Friedman was the author. And in it, he talked about like the fox type wisdom or hedgehog type wisdom. And it was kind of an odd thing, not intuitive, but hedgehog concepts were those that had very simple, formulaic, brief, emotional, categorical answers. And those are the things that we rally behind, and they make sense. They can make good political statements. But they've done studies like in economics, for example, and the Fox type answers are those that are highly nuanced. They're very conditional. There's a lot of variables that are expressed to them. There's not always easy solutions. And economic models, they've been studied, and those that are more hedgehog-like against those that are more fox-like. Well, the hedgehog ones are not the most accurate. They do not win out over time. They're too based upon simple theories, or not based enough on observation and things that actually happen. And theories are just always prone to fall flat against complex systems like living things. So yeah, it's a sad state that the messages that really are more apt to be correct are just by default the ones that are harder to hold on to.
And that may be, again, a symptom of our attention spans. There's so many different outlets vying for attention now that we tend to, we try to multitask, which really means switching between tasks rapidly. And that completely erodes our efficiency. We're much less efficient when we attempt to multitask compared to focus on one task at a time and do them serially. And I think that now that I identify myself as a fox and not a hedgehog, which is great. I think that one of the reasons why these sound bites have sort of won out in terms of messaging is because it's so easy. I only need to maintain your attention for 5 seconds. I can communicate everything I need to do. Eat like a caveman, right? I can communicate that in 5 seconds. And meanwhile, what I want to do as now a self-proclaimed fox is I want to explain what it is about the way our Paleolithic ancestors ate that translates right through the filter of the modern food supply, why it is those principles are actually supportive of health, and where the flexibility is, because just because they didn't have ovens and instant pots doesn't mean that those things aren't tools that we can use now. So where do we adapt for modern society? I cannot soundbite that. I cannot give you a 7 or 8 word slogan that explains all of that nuance, but that nuance is the difference between the health goal of I just want to lose 10 pounds for this wedding versus the health goal of I want to, reverse my diagnoses and live a long, healthy life. And so in order to achieve that real goal, right, the goal of being healthy and living a long time, I need more than a soundbite to be able to communicate the entire picture of important things that require our focus in order to achieve that.
That's awesome. That's just spot on. I want to be respectful of your time, mindful of your time. I've appreciated this. I've had a blast with this discussion. I want to just close with, are there any things that you've thought about lately that you just wish people were clear on that maybe, I don't know, maybe fads are clouding of their awareness, perhaps things that they should do they're missing out on out of just fear or biases, or maybe things that they are doing in the diet that they should avoid they've not been aware of. I don't know if there's any big things that have been recurrent for you that you just wish people were getting a better handle on that it seems like they're not.
There's more than one thing, so I think we just started a whole new episode right now. So I'm going to start with the easy one.
Let's do a teaser for it.
Let's do. I think the easy one is sleep. I think even in the alternative health community, we get into this rut where we sleep with whatever hours we have left at the end of the day once we've finished our to-do list, rather than having sleep be the thing on the to-do list that earns.
Oh, that's a tweetable. That's a tweetable right there. That's good.
And I think that, when you look at it was just an abstract. It was a poster presented at a conference a couple of years ago, and I've been keeping an eye out for the paper, but I haven't seen the paper come out yet. But it was a dog model, and they compared 1 night of lost sleep and looked at insulin sensitivity to 6 months of a Western-style diet. And the 1 night of lost sleep caused more insulin resistance than the 6 months of a high-fat, high-sugar diet. And when I think about that type of research, we get into this, because the other thing I really want to talk about is carbohydrates. We get into this, it's got to be low carb, and it's all of these things down the hill to regulate insulin, not even recognizing that insulin has plenty of roles in the human body that have nothing to do with glucose metabolism.
And they're important.
That are fundamental. And so we get in this so I'm going to do low carb, and I'm going to do zero carb, I'm going to do keto, I'm going to do all of these things that I'm only focused on this one pathway, which is insulin, and really just sleep. It's something that is so fundamental to every system in our body, and it really needs to be prioritized. And I think all grown-ups need a bedtime.
What's your sleep schedule like?
So I start getting ready for bed around 9. I aim to have my light out around 10, and my alarm goes off at 6:15. So I typically, if I look at my net sleep, so I have a Oura sleep tracker, which actually will give me a sleep score. It'll calculate how much deep sleep and REM sleep I got. I try to make sure I get at least 7.5 hours. So once it subtracts how long it took me to fall asleep and arousals during the night. So I'm actually looking at really detailed sleep data every single day. And my sleep schedule is not negotiable. So if my friends invite me out in the evening, I usually come up with a better excuse than I have a bedtime. But that is the real reason is, my bedtime is not negotiable. And in part, for me, I have 4 autoimmune diseases. And so I'm very sensitive to my sleep. And that's one of the things that I've learned through my own personal health journey. And so for me, a single night of 6 or 6.5 hours sleep, I'll be a wreck for 3 days. So I know that about myself. It makes it easier to prioritize sleep. But also it's, once sleep becomes a part of a schedule and part of, it's really important to me that I consistently get enough sleep and that I go to sleep at about the same time every night and that I wake up about the same time every day. It becomes easy, right? So just a major diet change can seem really intimidating. And then once you've been doing it for a couple months, you're like, I don't know why I was so intimidated. This is really easy now that I'm used to it. Sleep's the same. As soon as you realize how much better you feel when you're getting good sleep every single night, it becomes a lot easier to prioritize.
It's something I've observed in my life, and I tell people about this, is that you've got X number of hours in the day, and that's it. Mm-hmm. And you got to sleep, non-negotiable. So if you stay up late and you're, like you said, going to sleep based upon your to-do list, not on your body's needs, if you're staying up late, I would argue that most people aren't even working on their to-do list. If you're staying up later in the evening, you end up doing some stuff that's really not valuable time spent. It's usually just vegging out on binge watching or vegging out on shows or wasting time on
10,
social
11
media.
PM and yeah.
But then what do you do on the days when you get up early? Do you ever wake up early and binge watch Netflix? No, if you get up early and you're alert, you do important stuff. You do stuff that you're glad to have done. The garage gets cleaned. You make plans for the week. You prep some food ahead of time. So it's the same hours. But if you got those discretionary hours in the morning before your day starts, you do way cooler stuff than if you take those discretionary hours at the end of the day.
When I'm talking to entrepreneurs or business people, the pitch that I make for prioritizing sleep is I actually draw from productivity research, so research that looks at cognition, productivity, performance, and show them data in terms of like how much is your cognition impaired by not getting enough sleep. So now let's do some simple math. If you actually got enough sleep, you could get 25 to 45% more done per unit time than compared to being sleep deprived. And it's kind of hand wavy math because it sort of depends on exactly how sleep deprived somebody is and exactly what type of task they're trying to perform. But like let's just sort of ballpark this. You could get 30% more done per unit time. So is that 2 hours that you would spend working a longer workday better spent than 2 more hours in bed? Absolutely not. Because if you spend that extra 2 hours in bed, you're going to get that extra 30% done for your entire workday. So for those 8 hours instead of those 10, like that time is much better spent. And that is the same whether you're taking those 2 hours for work or for shuttling the kids around or doing housework or like any of those things. I would far prefer to be efficient in everything that I do throughout the day rather than have 2 extra hours to binge watch Game of Thrones.
So this has been such a blast. And let's do if you're a game, I'd love to do a sequel or follow-up and talk further.
I want to talk about
these
carbs
things.
still because...
I do too. I would love to talk about carbs with you. That'd be so much fun. We could have a lot of blast with that. I highly encourage listeners to check out thepaleomom.com. Look at her stuff. Look at her celery juice article and read that and know that I'm not going to write one now because it's there. Look at all of her other work. But yeah, thank you for being who you are and doing what you do. And I'm just super jazzed to connect and for this time that we've had.
Well, I mean, right back at you because as I said at the top of the show, this is so amazing to be able to connect with other people who really, it's not just the same philosophy in terms of honoring scientific evidence, but that same dedication to high integrity in terms of the articles we're writing and the resources that we're putting out. And I think it's really important for those of us who have that high integrity to band together and to be a community of thought leaders so that we can better educate the public and get them away from hedgehogs.
Awesome stuff. All right. Thanks to you all for joining us. I'll be back with you real soon. Bye-bye. Hey, Dr. Christensen here. Thanks so much for joining me for another episode. Is there a topic you'd like me to cover? I'd love to hear from you. Just go to Dr. Alan Christensen on Facebook or Instagram, write your question, and use the hashtag #MedicalMyths. Did you find this show helpful? If so, please take a minute and leave us a rating on iTunes so that others can know. Thanks much, and I'll be back with you real soon. Bye-bye.